Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Green Flag. I'm your host, Lukas Wacker, and welcome to the Kansas race recap episode for the Buschy McBusch Race 400 at Kansas Speedway. We've got lots to break down in the episode, including the race winner, which I'm sure you have seen who it is at the end of this one, and we'll look at the notable finishers in this one, as well as the driver of the day, and we'll give you a score at the end of it all as well. But before we get into the race recap itself, our thoughts and prayers go out to Eric McClure's family and friends, all of his loved ones, after it was announced this morning that on Sunday morning, that we tragically lost the life of Eric McClure, former NASCAR Xfinity Series driver at just 42 years of age. This is the last thing we'd ever want to do, is to start off an episode where we have to talk about somebody tragically passing like this, but unfortunately that is the case today. He made nearly 300 starts in his Xfinity Series career that spanned from 2003 to 2016. He's been out of commission since then. We haven't really seen him around the racetrack or anything like that. He's had a couple of health problems that we know of since his retirement from racing. He had a couple of injuries while he was doing his racing career as well. His best finish came in 2013 at the season opener race at Daytona, where he finished 8th. So his life and his legacy is continued on through his wife, obviously, and his 7 daughters. It's just a tragic, story here that Eric McClure has tragically passed away. So our thoughts and prayers are with everybody that that knew Eric McClure. From all accounts, he was a great human being, was active on social media with a lot of the race fans, and one of those humble guys that we see in the Xfinity Series, kind of like that run that mid-pack. Remember that 24? Sometimes he ran that number, sometimes ran the 14 and that orange and blue, paint scheme. It was very easy to pick out Eric McClure's car if you were at the track or watching it on TV. So unfortunate there that we have lost, a very great human being here, and he will be sorely, sorely missed. So wanted to preface that off the top of this episode, but let's get into the race recap itself from Kansas. Quite the race, quite the storylines in this one. The race winner included, and of course, a big turning point in the race, which we will talk about in a little bit. But let's get back to that race winner. And I'm, a little bit of a happy camper, to say the least, after this weekend's races at Kansas Speedway. Kyle Busch sweeps the weekend at Kansas Speedway, collecting the Truck Series victory on Saturday night and the Cup Series race on Sunday afternoon. What a showing from the 18 car. The best speed that we've seen from that team the entire season and for quite some time. He won, obviously, last season at Texas in the 34th race of the season. Left it late last year. This time he gets it out of the way in the 11th race of the 36 races calendar. What a performance by the 18 car. He's won a Cup Series race now for 17 consecutive seasons, which ties him for second all-time in terms of a streak with David Pearson. An incredible accomplishment there. Of course, Richard Petty holds the most. And then he also ties another record here with Cale Yarborough as the birthday boy himself. Kyle Busch gets to blow out the candles and cut the cake in victory lane for the second time in his NASCAR career, after winning back in 2009 at Richmond Raceway back on his birthday over a decade ago now. So the only times that the Cup Series has run on his birthday have been those 2 occasions, and he's undefeated in those. So quite the weekend, quite the day if you're Kyle Busch, of course. Quite the weekend if you're Kyle Busch. And what a monkey off of his back, just a huge relief for the 18 team. Of course, this is Ben Bishor's first career Cup Series victory as a crew chief. So congratulations to him as well, making that switch from Adam Stevens to Ben Bishor over the offseason. So it just a huge accomplishment for the entire team, from the driver to the crew chief to the entire personnel behind the scenes that has built this team up over the offseason. It's kind of a new look over there for the 18 car than we've seen in years past. So he becomes the 10th different winner of the season as well through the first 11 races of this season. So they're coming thick and fast. Truex is only the only driver right now that has multiple victories of this season, of course, coming at Martinsville and Phoenix. So it's just kind of a great place to be if you're at Joe Gibbs Racing right now. You have 3 guys now in victory lane, and the regular season points leader there in Denny Hamlin, who has yet to win a race, surprisingly. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But yeah, for Kyle Busch, he really needed this. It was a really great display, very consistent throughout the day. This was a deserved victory. This was no fluke. It wasn't the fuel mileage strategy that we saw at the Texas race on a 1.5 mile last season there, where he did end up winning a race finally then. This time around, he had raw speed. He was probably second best, maybe third best at times with Hamlin and Larson getting up there at the end, but definitely a top 3 car the entire race. Won a stage in this one as well. So a deserving victory for Kyle Busch. Is going through obviously a lot in his own life personally with his wife Samantha and their infertility struggles. So our thoughts are with Samantha Busch during this entire time as well. It's not easy what's going on there. So wanted to get that in there as well. But for Kyle Busch to focus back on the track, this is a huge, boost of confidence and just legitimizes that this decision over the offseason may be paying off. It's going to take some time. I'm not going to say he's going to straddle off about 3 in a row here or anything like that, but it's just a positive sign that at least they have won a race this season. And the Busch Clash curse seems to be lifted, at least for this season. In years previous, the winner of the preseason event for the season at Daytona, whether that was on the high banks or on the road course this season, the winner of that traditionally struggles. And this time around, of course, Kyle Busch won that race. And fittingly enough, both times that Busch has been a sponsor this season for a actual Cup Series event, Kyle Busch has ended up in victory lane. So quite the little tidbit there in terms of a hidden stat maybe, but the red, yellow Nevada was a big thing in this one as well after his radio message. We still don't know what it means, but whatever it is, I'm pretty sure they're going to want to keep it or, maybe keep that on the back burner until the playoffs comes around, because he is legitimately in the playoffs, get some valuable playoff points as well, which he crucially needed. He didn't have that out last season, which was a detriment to that team as the playoffs rolled on, and then he was already out by the end of the round of 12. So huge win for Kyle Busch. Executed the final restarts to perfection, got really great pushes from both Ryan Blaney and Martin Truex Jr. to propel him ahead, and then he can control that final restart there, which was crucial. We saw in the Truck Series race, he had a hit or misses on the restarts, had a phenomenal last one. Prior to that, when he was leading, he had some struggles. So just kind of a topsy-turvy weekend, but all in all, Kyle Busch ends up in the same place in victory lane. So congratulations to him and the entire 18 bunch, well-deserved. But let's look at probably the biggest turning point of the race to see how we got to that point in time. We'll look at the notable finishers after this. But for the turning point of this race, it happened during the final set of green flag pit stops, where Tyler Reddick had an uncontrolled tire roll out into the infield grass. Barely. It was fringe kind of on the grass. Of course, it was not on pit road, but Kansas has such a huge infield grass section that it was well out of the way in terms of the on-track cars going full speed. And it was well out of the way in that respect. But we have seen in the past where an uncontrolled tire gets called for a caution and relatively quickly. But this time around, it's been trending this way where NASCAR wants to wait till green flag pit stops cycle out, because that's usually where these happen. If they happen during a caution, of course, then it doesn't really matter as much. But during green flag pit stops, that has a huge effect on the result of the outcome of the next bit of the race. And specifically here, so late on in the race that featured little to no cautions, with the stage breaks and only the competition caution up to this point being the only causes for the yellow flag to come out. It would have been a really big turning point in this race, because we had a couple of guys playing that long game that we traditionally see. But this time, I think the leaders probably pit a little bit sooner than we traditionally see, with about 55, 60-ish laps to go, right inside their fuel window. They can make it to the end, no problem. But at the end of the day, NASCAR didn't decide to throw a caution here, as green flag pit stops did not entirely cycle out, as there was a couple of go-getters that were up at the front there, including Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and the leader at the time, Chris Buescher, who were trying to stay out, as long as possible to try and catch that yellow flag. And NASCAR waited and waited and waited for 20 plus laps until finally they had to pit because of fuel issues and just to get fresh tires on their cars. And NASCAR decided to not throw a caution to disrupt the flow of the race and wait till every single driver had pitted, gone through their green flag cycle, let them get a 1, maybe 2 laps up to speed there for Buescher specifically, because he was the longest one out there on that strategy. And then NASCAR finally decides to throw the caution flag and really spice things up, because it's going to get social media attention, deservedly so, because it's just a questionable call on NASCAR's part, because the whole reason that they decided to throw caution in the first place for an incident like this is for safety. And the fact that they were able to run around for 20 laps under green, cars going, full blast, of course, it's well out of the way of the tire, specifically in this instance at Kansas, like I said. But if you're going to call a caution 20 laps later, why bother? Because if you've been racing for 20 laps, then it doesn't seem to be nearly as much of a safety issue. It's just trying to, really determine the outcome of the race. It's manipulation, if you want to look at it that way as well. And under the NASCAR rule book, that is a $50,000 fine. So it's contradictory in a lot of ways here what NASCAR did, because they, safety is their number one priority, as it should be in motorsports. The driver's safety is at the utmost importance. But at the end of the day, they contradicted themselves by letting the cars, continue to race while this tire is just sitting there. Nobody would ever have hit that tire. It would have to be some sort of crazy incident where the tire would have been hit during a spin or something like that. It would have been a freak accident. And of course, there is a 1 in a million chance that something like that does happen. So you got to take all precautions as necessary. But at the same time, it is a bit concerning to a respect. But after the race, we heard some drivers say that they made the right call, namely Kyle Busch and Brad Keselowski and his crew chief Ben Bishore, that they were happy with the decision. Hindsight's 2020, and of course the winner's going to be a little bit more happy than others, specifically Chris Buescher, who I'm sure was hollering over the radio, "Get me a caution," because it would have really stirred things up. Some guys would have been held a lap down, and some guys would have to take a wave round. At that point in time, about 13 cars or so were on the lead lap, so Buescher would have fallen back to then, because you'd imagine that the guys that just pitted under green flag stops would stay out. So at the end of the day, did it have a huge effect on the race? Not necessarily, but it jumbled up the pack where it created these chaotic restarts, and it just jumbled up the pack. And we had some comers and goers at the end there, different strategies in terms of how, if you wanted to pit for tires, some of the leaders chose track position, some of them didn't. And it was quite the strategy at the end there. So that spiced things up for the race result. I think NASCAR made the right call in terms of calling a caution no matter what, because you can't really risk something like that. But their timing could not have basically been worse in terms of how they wanted to play it. So, looking at it, stepping away from it as a Kyle Busch fan myself, you got to just look at it and be like, it would just be good if you had somebody like Chris Buescher up at the front, or they had that strategy go their way, because NASCAR promotes strategy as a crucial element of their races, and having that part kind of diminished, or not even a part of the equation in their mindset there a little bit, where they felt the need to throw the caution basically right away when the tire did get first uncontrolled. It begs the question of, what is NASCAR's morals here, and what do they effectively want here? Do they just want the front guys to be running at the front the entire time, or do we want to spice things up and see some of these mid-pack guys get a chance up at the front? So definitely a turning point in the race, because it condensed the field. Larson lost his big lead at that point in time. We'll talk about him in a little bit as well in the notable finishers, but it was quite the mess. Social media, it was up in arms. Kyle, our co-host here, had some choice words, and rightfully so. I think they were all in good faith and in good heart. We all want to see the best for this sport, and when you have gimmicks or manipulation to the extreme like that, where it's so evident, it is frustrating at the end of the day, because we want to see a fair racing product, and that really wasn't the case on this specific instance with this uncontrolled tire. Who would have thought an uncontrolled tire would really stir up this much drama and debate on social media and amongst fans in the stands, and drivers themselves, and team personnel, and the broadcast. And the broadcast was very confused too. They're like, I mean, they shouldn't really throw a caution now, but and they ended up calling the caution. So all in all, at least the race winner itself isn't too out of place from what it could have been at the end of the day. So I think it would have been a lot differently if we had more chaos with the front guys. You can look at that final restart and say maybe this turning point was a result of that, but I think that's a little bit too far as we had a couple of restarts after that. But yeah, curious to know what your guys' thoughts are. Leave them in the comment section below, and we'll definitely reply to them and just give us your thoughts on the uncontrolled tire, non-call, caution, whatever you want to describe it as. But definitely a topic of discussion of this one here. So yeah, that's the turning point of this race. Fairly straightforward, good racing throughout this event as well. The mile and a half package this season has been pretty solid, I'd say, from what we saw last season, specifically in the fall race here at Kansas. We talked about that on the preview show, where the Logano and Harvick incident there in the fall, where it was just, basically a train along the wall, and you couldn't pass anybody because the aerodynamics and the air, the clean air being out front was so crucial. And that was kind of the case in stage one there for a bit. We saw a 5-car breakaway with Brad Keselowski, William Byron, Kyle Larson, Tyler Reddick, and Kyle Busch, that was. And they were kind of all running similar lap times there for the large majority of it. But then in the last 10 laps or so, it got really spicy. We had lots of lead changes, lots of movement from the pack. The guy that was actually the back, Kyle Busch, won that first stage there from coming from 5th to 1st there. So good racing there in that first stage. Second stage was largely dominated by Kyle Larson. And that 5-car, once again, proving that he is the best this season on the mile and a half. Unfortunately, did not get the finish he ultimately deserved. Probably could have been in victory lane, probably should have been in victory lane at the end of the day, but definitely a top 5 finish for that 5-car was deserved. So unfortunate for him. We'll talk about him just a little bit later on as well. But yeah, good racing overall. Those final couple of restarts there really got chaotic. We had a couple of guys spin. Christopher Bell, one guy on my fantasy lineup, and congratulations to Kyle as well on his fantasy win this week. Just edging me up by, it seems like 16 points on this occasion. I got the race winner pick right. I can't believe it. The one time I picked Kyle Busch to win a race, I got it right. And it was a really great battle because Kyle picked Kyle Larson. And it was just, of course, the 2-stage winners going head to head there really late in the going for this victory. So felt good about that. We're really on par, when it gets to these kind of predictions here. We're not too far off. We have a couple of mishaps here and there, but at the end of the day, these mile and a half short tracks, I think we traditionally do, the pair of us do very, very well. So felt good about that one. I get the race winner pick right. Kyle gets the overall victory. So congratulations to him once again on that. It's a weekend of Kyle's for this one. So you got to feel good if you're a dude named Kyle. But yeah, like I said, chaotic restarts. Christopher Bell got spun there late after a poor restart that set him back a little bit. Going into turn 3, he gets loose. And then he spins around collecting both JTG cars, unfortunately, Ryan Preece and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. at the raw end of the deal there. So unfortunate for those guys, specifically Stenhouse, who falls out of that top 16 in points now. So gonna need a big turnaround week at Darlington, where he has done decently in his career. We'll see if that 47 car can rebound next weekend at the throwback weekend for Mother's Day at Darlington on Sunday. So yeah, just a good race, a pretty solid mile and a half. Of the ones that we've had so far, this is probably the lesser of the 4 races. It would be near the end of that, probably about 3rd or 4th there amongst that pack. But nonetheless, Kansas, a good racing product. And if only we had more off throttle time and we got to see these drivers really go at it, and driver skill really did come into play more so with the track really curing and aging really nicely here at Kansas after that repay back in 2012, 2011, I believe it was. So that really does it for the race breakdown itself. But let's look at the notable finishers for the Buschy McBusch Race 400. What a name. What a name. Of course, off the top, we have Kyle Busch. Fairly self-explanatory. We've talked about him at length already. In second place, Kevin Harvick. So the Busch sponsor car and a Busch end up 1-2 in this one. You think it would be rigged, but it's, maybe, I don't know. But the circumstances worked out for Kevin Harvick. He had an uncontrolled tire there on one of his final pit stops there under the caution flag that was, and he got sent to the back there. And luckily for him, he had a couple of restarts go his way, had some fresher tires in his competition as well, 8 laps fresher tires at the end of this one, and battled back to P2. Got me a little nervous as a Kyle Busch fan. I was like, oh man, Harvick, he's coming. But, if it maybe a couple more laps, Harvick could have done something. But the clean air was king at the end of the day here. So, but a huge day for Kevin Harvick here. His best result of the season by far, was consistently in the top 10. So a deserving top 5 finisher, I would say, and getting second is just an added bonus to this one. Still looking for his first win of the season as well is Kevin Harvick. So, and when you look at what his teammates did today, yeah, leaves you a lot to be desired if you're the 3 other cars of Stewart-Haas Racing, but Kevin Harvick really carrying the banner as per usual, really, with that team. So huge second place for them. Brad Keselowski, after his win at Talladega last weekend, follows it up with a 3rd place run here at Kansas. Consistent the entire day. Started on pole in this one, led a lot of the first stage, and then fell back a little bit at the end of it there, as he just probably pushed a little bit too hard, but was inside that top 6 the entire day, I would say. And he had fresher tires at the end there as well. So if he doesn't slide up there in turns 1 and 2 there from Kevin Harvick, putting some pressure on him, maybe he can do something in 3 and 4 if he's close enough to Kyle Busch. But at the end of the day, like I said, clean air is king. So a huge day for Brad Keselowski. And, it's just keep on rolling for the 2 car here. And a good fantasy day for both of us, with Kyle making one of his first selections, basically, of Brad Keselowski, and myself getting another value usage out of him as well. So that's your top 3. Not too many surprises there when you look at Kansas history. But here at number 4, an honorable mention from our fantasy preview as well. Matt DiBenedetto, once again inside the top 5 for the 2nd consecutive week, finishing 5th last weekend at Talladega, was in position to potentially win that race, if not for that final restart and a caution falling there late in the going, but had some phenomenal restarts here at the end of it for the 21 car. And he's back inside the top 16 in points, a familiar place where he was last season, and now he is finally able to right that this season. And after having that really slow start, he just couldn't find any momentum. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong for the 21 car for the first about 5-6 weeks of the season, but they're starting to find that consistency, and they're capitalizing here on some other people's mistakes, and they are definitely getting some value here from Matt DiBenedetto, who, there's a little bit of news that maybe came out after the race today that Penske has an option for him in 2022. Does that mean that they could go to a 4th car, potentially that long eluded 4th car there for Penske and their big stable itself? Should be interesting to follow that storyline if Penske decides to expand into a 4-car stable, which I think would be awesome for the front part of the competition, and for Matt DiBenedetto to get a prime ride like that at the front of the field. So that's an evolving storyline. We'll see if those rumors or even the little tidbits that we may get from that evolve as the season goes along, and we have you covered here at the Green Flag on that front. So congratulations to Matt DiBenedetto for another top 5 finish, and then rounding out the top 5, Hendrick Motorsports' top finisher for this event. Wouldn't have thought this throughout probably 265 of the laps run today, but it's Chase Elliott. A quiet day, inside the top 10 for most of it, 5 to 10 range, I would say, for the 9 car. Lacking a little bit of speed than his teammate there in Kyle Larson, but was the 2nd best Hendrick car consistently throughout the day. Byron had moments where he was good, but Elliott was inside that top 10 pretty consistently there. So still waiting that first win for the defending champion. I'm sure it will come in a matter of time, but the road courses are coming thick and fast, and we can imagine Chase Elliott will be victorious on at least one of those, if not multiple, when these road courses come thick and fast, with 5 over the remaining races of the regular season. So we move back to 6. Martin Truex Jr. ends up in 6th place here. Similarly to Chase Elliott, I think a little bit disappointed from what I had expectations coming into this weekend. Both Kyle and I stayed away from him. Even though he was an honorable mention, It's just the usage situation, and definitely felt good about saving Martin Truex Jr. after this event. Still had a solid day, don't get me wrong, but when you look at how valuable Truex is on across all different types of racetracks, this is a race where I can live with not playing Truex in my fantasy lineup. So 6th place nonetheless, was pushing his teammate there on those final restarts, which gave Kyle Busch a bit of momentum, was on 2 right side tires as well at the end of it, so had a little bit fresher rubber, but when you had some other guys charging that had 4 fresher ones, Truex could only do so much at the end of the day. So he finishes 6th. And then big shout out to Tyler Reddick here in 7th place, was running in the top 5 the entire first stage, and he was an honorable mention as well. So feel good about how we did fantasy this week. One of the only times our honorable mentions and our stay away from's really prevailed at the end of it all. And for Tyler Reddick, drifted back a couple of times throughout this race, but I think overall, if you're the 8 car, you got to feel really great. And the 1.5 miles continue to prove that that's his strong suit in the Cup Series, much like Homestead. The wall riding ability that Tyler Reddick possesses is really unmatched in this sport. Kyle Larson is the closest that can rival that in terms of finding the absolute maximum that the car can ride on the edge of a racetrack. So ends up getting back inside that top 10, fell back to about the mid-teens there at one point in the race, but he salvaged a bit of a good finish here at the end of it, and deservedly so for Tyler Reddick. Chris Buescher here, after having the mishap there, having to take the wave around after that caution cycled through with the green flag pit stops and him playing that long game there, he takes the wave around. And then through a plethora of restarts there to end the race, he ends up inside of the top 10. So if you're Chris Buescher, all is well at the end of the day. You wouldn't have finished remotely there if that caution didn't come out. So I guess it all worked out in the end for the 17 car. The same cannot be said for the 47, unfortunately. But for Buescher, I mean, he just continues his really great pace on these 1.5 mile tracks. And I'm thoroughly impressed with Roush Fenway's program this season compared to where they were last season on these kinds of tracks. So props to Chris Buescher, top 10 finish, something that I was not expecting remotely here at Kansas, and does, once again, a very solid job in the equipment that he's in. William Byron in 9th, really strong in stage 1. From then on was pretty mediocre, but he still continues his really impressive top 10 finishes. I don't know how this guy does it, but Rudy Fugle has definitely got something clicking. He has the most top 10s out of anybody in the series right now, with 9 through the first 11 races of this season. I mean, that's 9 consecutive for the 24 cars. So you got to feel good if you're William Byron right now. And he's truly emerged as a real threat this season, consistent threat. We'll see how many race wins he ends up getting by the end of this season, and a breakout candidate for sure, as Kyle did in our preseason predictions episode way back when, before the 500. So another top 10 for Byron. And to round out the top 10, Austin Dillon, quiet, solid day for the 3 car. And he's comfortably inside the top 16 in points right now. Of course, you have a couple of guys below him that have won a race so far, so that bumps him down a little bit. But he still looks pretty solid at the end of the day. And I would not be surprised if he's a guy that points his way in, because RCR has really got their package going. They're consistent. They stay out of trouble for the most part of these events now. And, Austin Dillon is really maturing himself into a very impressive race car driver and getting those consistent results that we didn't see for a large majority of his time in the Cup Series. So another top 10 for him. And then a big shout out here as well behind him in 11th place for Daniel Suarez. Trackhouse continues to impress me this season. Of course, you think back to the Bristol Dirt and how well he ran there for his first time on dirt ever in his racing career. And here, I think Trackhouse has definitely done a better job than 2311 Racing through the first 11 races of this season. And I wasn't really expecting that, considering the expectations that we had for the 23 car compared to the 99. But for Suarez, they played a pretty great strategic race, played the long game for a lot of it during the green flag pit stops. It all worked out in the end, got some good restarts there at the end, and ends up getting an 11th place finish for Daniel Suarez. So feeling great about the 99 car. Is only a couple points behind, 7 points behind the 23 car right now. So that battle of new teams coming into the Cup Series still has the edge to 2311 Racing, but I'm sure we would have hoped for a bit of a wider gap if you're a Bubba Wallace fan specifically, or a Michael Jordan fan. But Trackhouse is keeping them honest, so that's a good thing for that midfield battle. Then we go back to 12th place here. Denny Hamlin was in the top 3 for for about 2/3 of the race, I would say that first part in that first stage was, in the back half of the top 10, but still in contention. Then that second stage, we saw him really come to life. And then that third stage, he had the lead late in the going, but Hamlin does it again. He chokes it away, and he's in clean air. Larson, of course, is pressuring him, and I guess into a mistake at the end of the day for Denny Hamlin there. He gets into the wall off of turn 4. It wasn't really a bad aero situation. Larson wasn't necessarily close enough where I personally feel like the air would have been so bad on the 11 car that he can have an excuse to hit the wall like that, but he pounded the wall off of turn 4. Larson goes to the lead in the late goings there, and then not even, I guess, maybe a lap later, I guess it was. Maybe not even, maybe it was just the front straightaway there for Denny Hamlin. He ends up getting into the fence, and he just totals the right side of his car, salvages to get a 12th place finish out of it. So not too bad. Kyle uses a usage on him here. Had a decent day, but at the end of you expect more from a Denny Hamlin usage when we see how many top 5s that he's had this season. So 35 points. That's a below average race for Hamlin so far this season. So we'll see if that usage maybe comes back to bite Kyle in fantasy. But nonetheless, for Hamlin, salvages something after he kind of threw away another chance at a victory this season. So just waiting for that first win, man. It'll come. But, we're not seeing Denny Hamlin quite there to – he's not clutch. I think that's the big thing for Denny Hamlin with me. And I said that on the preview episode. I think – he won a lot of races last season, of course, but I think he fluked into some of them. The laps led total really justifies that, I feel like. But let us know your thoughts. Do you think Hamlin is a little bit overrated, or do you think he's right where we are basically placing him one of the top drivers in the sport, and deservedly is at the front of the field on most occasions? But today was not Hamlin's best day in the closing lap, so gets a 12th place finish out of it. Behind him in 13th, Michael McDowell started third in this race, fell back relatively quickly, and we kind of expected that, but still ends up with another top 15 finish. This guy in the point situation right now, as I'm looking, 13th overall in points. And to list some of the guys behind him, Alex Bowman, Chris Buescher, Matt DiBenedetto, Kurt Busch, you have these guys back here that, are really, really consistent drivers, and Michael McDowell is ahead of them. And he's won a race. So he's locked into the playoffs, and he's been pretty consistent. So props to the entire 34 team so far this season. Really impressive from him. And to get a 13th place against some of these guys, of course, Larson and Blaney had some issues there, which we'll talk about in a second, that kind of propelled some of these guys a little bit further than they should have been. But 13th, still nothing to be sad about if you're Michael McDowell. Behind him there in 14th, want to give a quick shout out to Ross Chastain. Ran the Truck Series race, had a tire rub on the final restart, was close to beating Kyle Busch at the end of it, was in prime position too, and just couldn't quite execute that final restart. And Kyle Busch is in the Truck Series. We all know kind of what the expectations are from the 51 truck down there. But for Chastain, that kind of Saturday practice session, if you will, translated to the race on Sunday. He was very consistent inside the top 15, I felt like, for the majority of the race. It seemed like he had a lot of maneuverability in his car, which was a really great characteristic to see from Chastain. And unfortunately, they pitted there on that last caution or the penultimate caution, and then that set him back. And he probably would have finished higher if he stayed out, but I can understand what they were trying to do there. I think it was maybe after that Bell accident there. So Chastain probably could have had a little bit higher when you look at some of the names that were ahead of him at the end of the day, but this was by far, I think, Ross Chastain's most impressive performance in that 42 car this season. We go back to 16th place here. The 700th start for Ryan Newman, the Rocket Man himself, had a penalty early on in this race. I think it was after the competition caution where he was penalized for improper body modifications, something that we haven't seen in quite some time. The Jackman flared out the side skirt, and we saw that at the beginning of this Gen 6 era, where the side skirts were basically just fins on the side of these things that could, be the death of a left rear tire or a left front tire with any slight bit of contact. But Newman gets called for it here, has to serve a penalty, but 16th place, still a decent recovery drive for Ryan Newman. Go back to 17th behind him there in Joey Logano. I mean, got to give this guy credit where credit's due. The finish is obviously disappointing, but this guy gutted it out for food poisoning that hit him pretty hard prior to the race. The day prior had some fluids put in him just to be out there. He was not obviously at his full capabilities out there on the track, but still get 17th with food poisoning and being under the weather like that. That's still pretty respectable. So I'll give Joey Logano a notable finisher mention here, just based off of his gutsy performance here for the Buschy McBusch Race 400. Then we go right behind him here, Alex Bowman. One of my biggest disappointments of the event, his 200th career start in the Cup Series, was definitely one to forget. And we had high expectations. Both Kyle and I had him in our fantasy lineups, and just was nowhere near the top 10 in the entire day. He finished where he probably was running the entire day at the end of it. So just didn't quite have it for the 48 car. And I think that's a little bit concerning. We haven't seen that speed so far on these 1.5 mile tracks this season. And, when you look at what his teammates is doing there, specifically Kyle Larson, they got to figure it out a little bit here sooner. And William Byron, I can add into that category as well. So, disappointing for Bowman. You throw this away, you forget about it, and move on to the next one here at Darlington next weekend. Then we move on to the final three here that were involved in incidents late in the going. First off, Kyle Larson in 19th place. The dominant car of the day led 132 laps over the half the race, or almost half the race, I guess, and doesn't end up in victory lane once again with that dominant car of the day. We saw it in Atlanta. That was even more dominant of a performance there at that racetrack. But 2 races this season on these kinds of tracks where he hasn't quite been able to execute it. Burned his stuff up at Atlanta. This time, restarts just didn't quite go his way, didn't get the push he needed. And then on that final restart, he just kind of lost his head, I think, or something happened where he just pushed Blaney so far. And, the 12 car could only take so much, spinning him into a side spin. And then Blaney miraculously saved it, both of them getting into the wall. It was just a calamity of errors there, really in the going there, late in the going for Larson, and not deserving of that finishing place whatsoever. Gonna look back at this one as a missed opportunity for sure. Is Kyle Larson, of course, running the Ricky Hendrick kind of throwback scheme, if you will. This was where Ricky Hendrick scored his one and only Truck Series victory before we tragically lost him due to a plane crash here. So there was sentimental value. Of course, the broadcast was harping on it, rightfully so. It's the first time that paint scheme has really been back since Ricky Hendrick left us so soon. But for Larson, you forget about this one to an extent. You feel good about how you ran for 95% of the race. Restarts just didn't go your way. You come back to Darlington, a place where you've been really, really good in your career so far, and you try and go out there and win the throwback race next weekend on Mother's Day. So unfortunate for Larson, and unfortunate for our fantasy lineups that he fell back a little bit too far, specifically for Kyle, of course, being his race winner pick. Then the other guy that he was involved with there late in the going on that final restart, Ryan Blaney. This guy, yet another disappointing finish. We talked about this in the preview show as well. It's like we can basically predict this race without even having to watch it. He's so solid here at Kansas, runs in the top 5, top 7 the entire day. And then something happens late in the going where he just ends up back in the 20s or late teens. That is just unfair, really, for the 12 team. You feel bad for Ryan Blaney, but maybe we come to expect this late in the going here at Kansas specifically. Could have potentially even won this race if a restart goes his way, but that was not the case here on Sunday. He just basically got turned by Larson, and there was nothing, Blaney could do at the end of it. So unfortunate there. I would have loved to have heard his comments after the race if he gave them, and just his perspective on the whole thing, because we didn't really get a concrete answer from Larson on what happened there. But, racing's racing, and unfortunately for Larson and Blaney there, they fall to the the late teens and the early 20 finishing positions there. So 2 guys in my fantasy lineup there. I had him for 95% of the race once again with Blaney, but just didn't quite get it done with the finish. And then last but not least here, a disappointing one to end it all. Christopher Bell ends up in 28th. One of the exceptions, or one of the differences between Kyle and I's fantasy lineups. Bell got shuffled back on that on the second to last restart there. Like I said, spun into turn 3, collecting the GTG cars, and was having a decent day prior to that. So, you know, I was expecting a little bit more from Bell, but just didn't quite get the breaks there at the end of it. So unfortunate for the 20 car, but that does it for the notable finishers for the Buschy McBusch Race 400 from Kansas Speedway. Let's look at the driver of the day for this race. And, you know, there's a couple of guys you could definitely throw out there, but I'm going to go with the easy pick, and it maybe look a little biased. Maybe it is. I don't know, but I think he is definitely deserving of a mention, if not this award. So I'm going to give it to him anyways. Kyle Busch is your driver of the day, scoring the race victory, of course, winning a stage as well. He only led 20 laps in this one, came on strong when he needed it most, but he scored 59 of a possible 60 points in this one. And that's the key for me. He had his best performance of the season by far. And that's, you know, it's as well on his birthday. You can't, you know, not give the driver of the day to the birthday boy who ends up winning the race itself. So happy birthday to Kyle Busch as well. From a fan of his since 2008. Happy 36th birthday to the Candyman himself. So it's a huge stress relief personally for me that I don't have to worry about him not making it into the playoffs. Now he's locked in, and I can breathe a sigh of relief for the remainder of the regular season. So that feels good. But the driver of the day, I think, goes to Kyle Busch. Beyond that, I think you give a good shout to Matt DiBenedetto. Once again, gave it to him last week for Talladega. Just getting a top 5 here at Kansas, that's definitely worthy of something. And Tyler Reddick and Chris Buescher, those are the other two that I would say, you know, if God was doing Cush's threes, I think those would probably be somewhere in that mix there. But the driver of the day, Kyle Busch, stayed out of trouble, kept his nose clean, and ends up in victory lane, a crucial victory for him. So you can expect the race winning diecast here at some point in time, maybe added to this setup, or maybe out in Toronto when I have to eventually move back out there. But that's the driver of the day for Kansas. Let's give this an overall rating, shall we, to end off the NASCAR Cup Series here. You know, of the mile and a half, the highest rating I've given a race this season, I believe, is an 8.5 with 3 different races, I would say. The 2 mile and a half being Homestead and in Las Vegas. I was really impressed with those ones. I think this is definitely a little bit lower than that. Kyle Busch's win maybe brings it up a little bit, but the shenanigans with the tire maybe bring it back down to earth a little bit. But I'll give it a pretty solid 7 out of 10 rating here. I can't give it any higher than that. I would give it a 10 out of 10 for my excitement level when the checkered flag flew, but for the race itself, it was Kyle Larson's show for the most part. We had some good racing, good battles. Seemed like there was maneuverability in the track as we expect at Kansas, but that probably the shenanigans there with the non-thrown caution for so long probably bring it down an entire number for me there. So yeah, that's the rating for this one. Pretty solid race overall. Let us know in the comments what you thought of this race itself. It was definitely an eventful one, but definitely feel good about it as a Kyle Busch fan. So that does it for the Kansas Cup Series race recap. The Truck Series, of course, Kyle Busch wins that one. Pretty, dominant performance led. He only lost one stage, I guess, this entire weekend, being that second stage in the Cup Series event, but was good. Chastain finished in second, like I mentioned there earlier, for his notable mention. Austin Hill was in contention there. Shout out to Christian Eckes as well in the 98 truck, getting the 4th position finish there. John Hunter Nemechek getting another top 5 finish. So, and of course, a shout out to our guy, Rafael Lessard, of course, being on the show earlier on this year, gets an 8th place result for him there. So, overall, a decent weekend of racing at Kansas Speedway, and Kyle Busch is victorious in both events there. We'll see if he can duplicate that. Maybe if he's in the playoffs in that round of 8 come, I guess, probably October is when that race would be. So, yeah, I think that does it for the Kansas race recap. Make sure to go follow us on Instagram at The Green Flag Pod, as well as Twitter at The Green Flag Pod. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. We would really, really appreciate it. The support on the channel has been really great recently, so thank you all so much from that on behalf of Kyle and myself. But all the links to our social channels as well will be in the description of the YouTube video. But for this episode, I've been Lukas Wacker, and make sure you go check out our other race recaps that I will be doing here for the Portuguese Grand Prix and the doubleheader weekend from Texas Motor Speedway for IndyCar. Those were two really great racing events there as well. So those will be up on the channel as well. So make sure you go check those out. But for NASCAR fans, Kyle and I will be back later on this week to get you previewed for the Darlington Throwback Weekend.